The Wednesday morning meeting had been on the calendar for 2 weeks. Company updates, Q3 recap, exciting announcements. My boss always used that exact phrase, exciting announcements, whenever he was about to roll out something that benefited exactly one person, himself. I'd been with Ferris Climate Solutions for 8 years, Director of Service Operations. When I started, we had 11 field technicians and 3 service contracts. Now we had 62 technicians, a fleet of 31 vans, and service agreements covering 48 commercial properties across central Indiana, hospital systems, school districts, office parks. I built that. The dispatch systems, the preventive maintenance schedules, the prevailing wage compliance protocols for our federally funded school contracts. I knew every contract manager's name, every facility director's cell number, every building's quirks. So when my boss cleared his throat at the front of the conference room and said he had some big news, I already felt it. Not because I'd heard anything, because I'd learned to read him. 8 years does that. He introduced his nephew as the company's new vice president of operations. The room applauded. I sat there, hands still, staring at the whiteboard behind my boss, like the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. His nephew was 27. He'd been with the company for 5 months. My name is Clark. I'm 54 years old, and I've lived in Indianapolis my entire life. Grew up in Beech Grove, went to IUPUI nights while working HVAC service during the day, spent 20 years climbing through a field I actually understood. I can tell you the difference between a heat exchanger wearing down and a condenser coil problem just by listening. I can read a psychrometric chart in my sleep. 8 years ago, when my boss came looking for someone to help him grow the commercial side of the business, he pitched me on vision. He said he wanted to build something that lasted, something that served the community, and he needed someone with real operational instincts to help him do it. He said, flat out, "Clark, the people who build this thing with me are the people who'll lead it." I believed him. I had reasons to want to. I'd gone through a hard stretch before I joined Ferris. My wife and I had split 2 years earlier. No ugliness, no big blow-up, just 2 people who'd grown into different lives. We sold the house in Broad Ripple, and I rented a 2-bedroom near the Manon Trail. My son was finishing high school then, applying to Purdue. My daughter was 13, spending weekends with me, bringing her homework over, asking me to quiz her on Spanish vocab at the kitchen table. They were my whole operation off the clock. I needed work that felt like it mattered. Ferris gave me that. I rebuilt the service division from the ground up. Went from paper work orders to a field management platform I personally vetted, negotiated, and implemented. I wrote the Davis-Bacon Compliance Manual, 40 pages, because we started landing federally funded school contracts, and I was not about to get us debarred over prevailing wage violations. I chased down subcontractors who tried to cut corners, sat through every city council vendor review, took calls at 10 p.m. from facility managers whose boilers had decided Tuesday night was a great time to die. My boss would call me into his office every few months and tell me how much he valued me. He'd lean back in his chair, cross his arms, and say something like, "Clark, when this thing grows to the next level, you'll be right at the top of it." I'd nod, go back to work. 6 months ago, he stopped me in the hallway and said his nephew was starting the following Monday. Fresh MBA from Kelly, wanted to learn the business from the ground up, would be shadowing operations. I said sure, thought nothing of it. His nephew was polished. Good handshake, confident eye contact, shoes that cost more than my bi-weekly paycheck. He walked in like he'd already mapped the org chart and decided where he fit. He introduced himself to me with a particular kind of smile, the kind you give someone when you know more than they do but are being kind about it. The first week, he asked if we had an app for tracking service calls. We had a platform. I showed him the platform. The second week, he sat in on a contract renewal meeting with the facilities manager at one of our hospital accounts. Partway through, while I was walking through the PM schedule, he jumped in to ask if we could streamline the reporting on their end. The facilities manager looked at him, looked at me, and said, "The current reporting works fine." I kept going. By month 2, he was in every meeting I was in. He'd pull up the contract spreadsheets I'd built, ask me to walk him through them, then walk out and ask someone else the same questions. I didn't think about why at the time. I thought I was being helpful. I thought that was my job. By month 3, I started thinking about it. It wasn't one thing. It was the accumulation. The way he always positioned himself next to my boss at every client walkthrough. The way he'd email clients directly after calls I'd run. The way my boss started copying him on threads where he hadn't been included before, and then stopped copying me on the responses. I called my old buddy Lou one evening, an independent contractor I'd worked with since before I came to Ferris. We were at a bar near the stadium, watching the Pacers game. I said, "You ever get the feeling you're training your own replacement? Without being told, that's what you're doing." Lou didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, I've been there. What are you going to do about it?" He didn't try to talk me out of my read on the situation. He just moved straight to the action question. I thought about that on the drive home. The next morning, I reached out to a contact I'd met at an industry conference 2 years back, a woman named Nadine, who ran business development for Meridian Mechanical, a regional commercial HVAC firm out of Columbus with operations across Ohio and Indiana. We'd had coffee once. She'd mentioned they were looking to expand in Indianapolis. I'd thought nothing of it at the time. I sent her a short message, told her I was exploring options. She responded in 3 hours. I didn't have to wait long to know I was right about everything else. It was a Thursday evening, end of November. Most of the office had cleared out. I was at my desk reviewing a compliance audit we had coming up for our Marion County School District contracts. If one prevailing wage certification was filed late or inaccurate, we'd be looking at contract penalties and potential debarment from the federally funded pool. That was not theoretical. That had happened to another firm in town. I'd watched it. I wasn't going to let it happen to us. My boss's office light was still on. His door was cracked. I could hear voices. I recognized the second voice, one of our long-term investors, a man who'd been with the company since the beginning. He was asking about the leadership transition. Specifically, he was asking whether there was a plan to address what he called the operational depth gap if changes were made at the director level. My boss said, "Clark's a field guy. He's wired for execution, not strategy. He'll always have a role here, but the VP seat needs someone who can think about where the industry's going, not just what needs to get fixed today." I stopped typing. He kept going. "Besides, his nephew's got the Kelly MBA. He understands the business development angle, and he's family." There it was. I sat at my desk for 60 seconds without moving. Then I closed my laptop, put on my jacket, and drove home. Didn't say goodnight to anyone. I called Nadine from my car in the parking garage. The announcement came 5 weeks later. I was already in conversations with Meridian. I knew roughly what the offer was going to look like. I still sat in that conference room and watched the room applaud. Some of those people I'd worked beside for years. A few of them shot me uncomfortable glances and looked away. One caught my eye and gave me a small, sorry nod. I appreciated that. After the room cleared, I went to my desk, opened a blank document, and typed 4 sentences. Effective 2 weeks from today, I am resigning my position as Director of Service Operations at Ferris Climate Solutions. It has been a privilege to contribute to this company's growth. I wish the team continued success. Clark. I printed it, signed it, and knocked on my boss's office door. He was still riding the wave of the announcement. He waved me in, smiling. I put the letter on his desk. His smile took about 2 seconds to disappear. I'll say this for him. He recovered fast. He put the letter down, folded his hands, and started working through his playbook. First came the reframe. "Clark, I understand this feels abrupt, but you've got to see the bigger picture. This doesn't diminish what you've built here." I didn't say anything. Then came the offer. "What if we created a senior advisor role? You'd have more autonomy, no direct reports, but still a seat at the table. Same base, possible upside." I said no. Then came the pressure. His voice shifted, got quieter, more careful. "You've been here 8 years. Your client relationships, a lot of that's been developed under this company's umbrella. If you go somewhere else and start working those relationships, we'd have an issue." I looked at him. "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality. You'd want to be careful about what you share with a competitor." "There's no non-compete in my contract," I said. I checked. His jaw moved. "The relationships are proprietary." "The relationships exist because people trust me," I said. "That's not something that belongs to a company." He leaned forward. "His nephew needs you. He's smart, but he doesn't have your institutional knowledge. 2 more years of you at his side, and this company takes the next step. I'm asking you to think about the long game." "I am thinking about the long game," I said. He didn't have anything left after that. I told him I'd honor the 2 weeks, do everything I could to document and transfer knowledge responsibly, and that he'd have my full professionalism until my last day. I walked out and closed the door quietly. The 2 weeks were clarifying in a way I hadn't expected. His nephew tried, I'll give him that. But trying and knowing are 2 different things. On my 4th day of notice, He came to me with a contract file he'd clearly been staring at for hours. It was the renewal packet for one of our largest school district accounts, Indianapolis Public Schools, a 4-year contract worth nearly $800,000. The renewal window had specific documentation requirements under the district's procurement rules, updated, prevailing wage certifications, new insurance certificates, and a facilities assessment report signed by a licensed engineer. He'd missed the engineer sign-off entirely. The submission was due in 72 hours. I didn't lecture him. I pulled up the requirements document and walked him through each line. I called our subcontractor to get the assessment turned around in 48 hours. I formatted the submission packet and flagged exactly what needed signatures before it went out. He said, "I didn't know this was even part of what we did." I said, "It's most of what we do." By the end of that week, I'd had calls from 2 facility directors asking if it was true I was leaving. The director at one of our hospital accounts called me directly. He was polite but plain. "The reason we renew every year is because you pick up the phone. I don't know this new person." I told him I understood. I told him the company was in good hands. I meant the part about understanding. By the end of my notice, I'd had 6 similar conversations. I was calm in all of them, professional. I made no promises about where I was going. But I heard what they were telling me, and I filed it away. My last day was a Tuesday. I turned in my badge, cleared my desk, said goodbye to the people I actually cared about saying goodbye to. A few of the senior technicians, the scheduler who'd been there as long as I had. One of the account managers I knew was also updating her resume. My boss came by my desk around 4, shook my hand, said the door was always open. I thanked him, meant none of it, and drove home. I had dinner with my daughter that night. She was a junior at Carmel High, already talking about Indiana State for environmental science. She asked me if I was scared. I told her I wasn't. She said, "Good. You always told me the right move feels scary before it feels right." I hadn't remembered telling her that, but I was glad she had. I signed the offer letter with Meridian Mechanical the following Monday. Vice President of Operations, Indiana Region. Salary 62% higher than what I'd been making at Ferris. Full benefits, company vehicle allowance, performance incentive tied to regional contract growth. Nadine walked me through it across a conference table at Meridian's Columbus office with a view of the Scioto River out the window. She slid the packet across and said, "We've had our eye on Indianapolis for 3 years. We needed the right person to anchor it." I read the offer twice, then I signed it. She said, "When can you start?" I said, 2 weeks if that works. She said, "That's perfect." On the drive back up I-70 toward Indianapolis, I had the windows down even though it was 38 degrees. I needed the cold air. The first 3 months at Meridian were the cleanest work of my career. No politics, no auditing everything I did for whether it reflected well on someone's family. Just the work, and room to do it. I set up the Indiana operations structure the way I'd always wanted. A tiered maintenance schedule, a regional compliance calendar, a client communication rhythm that didn't depend on any one person knowing everything. The kind of system that runs even when someone's on vacation. The facility director from the hospital account called me in week 3, asked if Meridian served Indianapolis. I said we did. He said he had a contract renewal coming up. 2 weeks later, that account was ours. The school district account took longer. They had a standing relationship with Ferris. But 6 months into my time at Meridian, I got a call from the district's procurement office. They'd had compliance issues with their current vendor, a late prevailing wage filing that had triggered a Department of Labor inquiry. They were looking at their options. I didn't have to say much. I just sent them Meridian's compliance documentation, the same framework I'd built over years, now attached to a different letterhead. They signed with us inside of a month. By the end of my first year, Meridian's Indiana division had landed 9 accounts. 5 of them had previously been Ferris clients. I hadn't solicited a single one. They found their way over. Nadine forwarded me a trade publication piece about 6 months in. The headline was something like "Central Indiana HVAC Firm Faces Federal Inquiry Over Prevailing Wage Violations." It was about Ferris. I read it. His nephew had submitted the Marion County School District certifications with incorrect wage rates for 2 trade classifications. The DOL had opened a compliance investigation. 2 of the federally funded school contracts had been suspended pending review. The article mentioned leadership instability and a recent executive restructuring as context. I put it down. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly. I felt something more like recognition of what I'd known for years. which was that those compliance systems weren't bureaucratic box checking. They were the things standing between the company and exactly this kind of exposure. Nadine said, "You built that protocol from scratch, didn't you?" "Yeah," I said. She said, "Then this makes sense." It did. I found out later through a mutual contact in the industry that his nephew had left the company before the investigation concluded, gone back to the corporate world, financial services, nothing to do with HVAC or operations, a clean exit from a mess that wasn't entirely his fault, but definitely included decisions he'd made. My former boss eventually settled the DOL matter, but the school district contracts didn't renew. That had been a cornerstone of Ferris's revenue. I didn't need to know more than that. My son called on a Sunday in February, 8 months after I'd left. He was a senior at Purdue, civil engineering, doing a capstone project that had just placed first in a regional competition. He called to tell me they'd won. I congratulated him. He said, "Dad, my team wanted me to ask something." Okay. One of my professors mentioned Meridian Mechanical in class last week. Said the person running the Indiana operations had restructured how compliance tracking was done across commercial HVAC, and that it was being cited in an industry journal. "Is that you?" "Probably," I said. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "My team wants to do a virtual Q&A for the capstone about operational systems in commercial mechanical contracting." I said, "Tell them yes." He said, "They're going to be impressed." I said, "Let them decide that." One afternoon in April, I was driving back from a job site in Carmel. I'd been out to assess a chiller replacement at a medical office complex. Hands-on work, the kind I still like doing even with the VP title. I stopped for coffee at a place near 96th Street I used to go to all the time. I was standing at the counter when I saw him. His nephew. Sitting alone at a table near the window, laptop open, a notebook beside it full of handwriting, no blazer, regular jeans and a pullover. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping particularly well. He looked up and saw me the same moment I saw him. For about 3 seconds, neither of us moved. Then I walked over, not because I had to, just because walking away felt like the wrong choice. "Hey," I said. He said, "Hey, Clark, no performance in it. I didn't expect to see you here." "Small city," I said. I didn't sit. I glanced at the notebook. It was full of what looked like operations notes, process flow diagrams, something that looked like a compliance checklist in the early stages of being built. "Doing some consulting?" I asked. He shook his head. "No. Taking time to actually learn what I should have learned before I took that job." He said it flat, no self-pity, just fact. I nodded. "For what it's worth," he said. "I knew I wasn't ready. I just let myself believe that ready didn't matter." I thought about saying something, about how the position had been set up to fail him, how no amount of MBA prepares you for that level of operational responsibility without real field time first. But he already knew that. It was sitting right there in his face. "The Davis-Bacon stuff is actually interesting once you get into it," I said. He almost smiled. "Yeah, I figured that out the hard way." I picked up my coffee from the counter. "Good luck with it," I said. He nodded once. "Didn't overdo it. Thanks, Clark." I walked out. The drive back downtown was quiet. I had a new site assessment in the morning, a county library system that had put out an RFP and specifically reached out to Meridian, but because someone on their board had asked around and heard my name. Nadine had forwarded me their message with a note that just said, "They came looking for you." My daughter texted while I was at a red light. She'd gotten into her first choice program, Indiana State, fall semester, environmental science, 3 exclamation points, which for her was practically screaming. I texted back, "Knew it, dinner this weekend." She sent a photo of herself holding the acceptance email on her laptop screen, grinning like she couldn't help it. I kept driving. 8 years ago, I thought I was planting roots in someone else's orchard. Thought if I worked the soil long enough, the harvest would eventually have my name on it. It doesn't work that way. I understand that now. What you build with your hands and your judgment and your years, that travels with you. It doesn't stay behind when you leave. It goes where you go. And when you finally put it down somewhere that actually fits, that's when you find out what you were really building all along.